Whitney Houston and Bobby Christina, two names that once brought the world to its knees, are again pulled into the unforgiving glare of renewed scrutiny. According to sources familiar with reopened FBI case materials, federal files have been reviewed with fresh eyes, revealing a detail as unsettling as it is precise. Both mother and daughter died under strikingly similar circumstances in the same confined setting, a bathtub, while navigating the relentless pressures of fame and long-documented struggles with substance abuse. This is no longer framed as an isolated downfall or a singular family tragedy. In the margins of official documents and witness timelines, it reads like a somber pattern, fueling public murmurs of what many have long called the Houston family curse. How did the voice, celebrated as the defining sound of a generation, descend from unmatched acclaim into personal collapse? What sequence of choices and vulnerabilities led her only child toward an eerily parallel fate, as though history itself had been looping? And why now, as investigators revisit archived evidence and overlooked intersections, does the public react with unease to elements that were once dismissed or quietly filed away? Before examining what these newly connected threads suggest and what they do not, remember to like and subscribe as we continue to unpack this troubling chapter with the caution, context, and restraint it demands. Whitney Houston was never just a singer. She was a cultural force, a voice powerful enough to pierce prejudice and quietly dismantle racial barriers, ascending to global reverence at a time when a black woman rarely occupied the industry's highest throne. They called her the Voice, and within internal summaries reviewed years later, that description still appears, underlined, as if no substitute term would suffice. Yet the stark irony recorded in official timelines is this: that incandescent presence faded in a place of excess, a luxury hotel room on the eve of the Grammy Awards. An ending few believed possible for someone who once defined the summit of fame. What stunned the public was not only her sudden death, but the precise circumstances now laid out in methodical detail. Houston was discovered in the bathtub of room 434 at the Beverly Hilton, surrounded by opulence and anticipation. Outside that door, Hollywood was humming, rehearsing joy, preparing for its biggest night. Inside, a global icon slipped away unseen, no spotlight, no applause, leaving behind only silence and a shock that reverberated far beyond the hotel walls. According to autopsy findings cited in federal case reviews, the primary cause was drowning, with heart disease and chronic substance use listed as contributing conditions. Toxicology reports documented multiple substances in her system, a convergence doctors later described as catastrophic for a heart already weakened by years of stress and dependency. For investigators and observers alike, the question persisted: how could someone who seemed to possess everything carry such an unresolved inner war? What remained largely outside public view were the tense final days preceding her death. Witness statements noted erratic behavior, moments of laughter and spontaneous singing followed by visible disorientation. Hotel staff recalled hearing her voice echo down the hallway, still unmistakably beautiful, yet strained, almost pleading. There were plans whispered about a comeback, a return to the stage. Instead, history recorded something far more final. The timing carried a bitter symmetry. Hours after her passing, the Grammys pivoted from celebration to mourning. On stage, Jennifer Hudson sang, "I Will Always Love You," her voice trembling as the room fell into stunned quiet. A woman who had symbolized American musical excellence was gone, just before being honored for the very legacy she helped build. In the aftermath, blame circulated relentlessly. Some pointed to Bobby Brown and a marriage marked by turmoil, others to the unforgiving machinery of an industry that demands perfection without pause. Still others referenced old threats and disturbing correspondence, details that sources say were quietly cataloged by the Federal Bureau of Investigation but never fully aired. In retrospect, it appeared as a closed loop, extraordinary talent paired with a heart no longer able to endure the weight placed upon it. Houston's tragedy was not only her death, but the unresolved question it left behind. Was it an accident of circumstance, or the foreseeable end of pressures long ignored? Behind the stage lights and accolades lived a woman burdened by fame, family expectation, racial scrutiny, and private demons. She was called an angel with the voice of God, and perhaps that is precisely why her story endures as a solemn record of the true cost of greatness. The death of Whitney Houston shattered the world, yet federal timelines show the tragedy did not conclude with her final breath. 3 years later, on a cold January morning in 2015, investigators logged another call that froze public consciousness. Bobby Christina Brown, the only child of Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown, was found unconscious in a bathtub at her suburban Atlanta home. The parallel was impossible to ignore. For many reviewing the case files, it felt as though 2012 had resurfaced, replaying itself with disturbing precision, as if the echo of the voice had never faded. What deepened the unease was the clinical symmetry documented in reports. On January 31, 2015, Nick Gordon, Bobby's partner, and someone Whitney had once treated like family, placed the emergency call after discovering her unresponsive. Bobby remained in a coma for nearly 6 months, sustained by machines and hope. Medical bulletins became national news. Yet, as with her mother, she never regained consciousness. The country watched a familiar script reach the same devastating conclusion. Investigative notes reveal additional complexities. Several individuals were present in the house that morning. Police reported no forced entry, no immediate signs of struggle. Statements described an ordinary day, abruptly turning catastrophic. Toxicology later confirmed a mixture of substances in Bobby's system, including alcohol, morphine, and anti-anxiety medication, a combination physicians deemed severely debilitating. Still, public skepticism lingered. Coincidence felt inadequate as an explanation. Bobby Christina's life unfolded beneath an immense shadow. She inherited not only a famous name, but its weight. From childhood, cameras followed her steps, chronicling both admiration and dysfunction, her parents' volatile marriage, tabloid scrutiny, and relentless speculation. After Whitney's death, Bobby became a symbol as much as a person, expected to embody resilience, legacy, even redemption. She tried to step forward on her own terms, testing her voice, appearing on stage, seeking independence. Yet comparisons were constant, the spotlight unforgiving. To the public, she was rarely Bobby. She was always Whitney's daughter. That fracture between identity and expectation appears repeatedly in psychological assessments referenced by investigators. Her relationship with Nick Gordon intensified divisions. Supporters described him as her anchor during grief. Critics warned of instability and risk. When Bobby fell into her coma, disputes between the Houston and Brown families erupted into public view, including legal battles over guardianship and responsibility. Private sorrow became spectacle, adding noise rather than clarity. As the similarities mounted, the language around the case shifted. Online discourse labeled it a curse, a narrative fueled by the shared image of a bathtub and by unanswered questions. Analysts within the Federal Bureau of Investigation caution against myth-making, yet acknowledge that patterns, familial, psychological, environmental, often shape outcomes more powerfully than any single event. Bobby Christina's tragedy lies not only in her death, but in the brief, burdened journey toward it. Young, searching, carrying dreams alongside grief, she struggled to exist beyond a legacy too heavy for anyone her age. In her final years, observers noted a quiet sadness that mirrored her mother's last chapter. Her 6 months in limbo were 6 months of national waiting and familial fracture. When she passed, headlines spoke of repetition. For those who had followed Whitney's rise and fall, it felt like an echo in the water, underscoring a hard truth, long familiar to investigators and journalists alike. Fame magnifies both brilliance and vulnerability, and when legacy becomes inheritance, the cost can be devastating. Anyone who witnessed Whitney Houston on stage, radiant, composed, her voice seemingly untouchable, would struggle to reconcile that image with what later emerged from federal files. Behind the curtain, according to documents reviewed by investigators, her days were punctured by anxiety and fear. The darkness did not stem solely from the exhaustion of fame or private battles, but from a paper trail of chilling letters, anonymous threats, and sustained intimidation. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation formally released portions of those records, the public grasped a sobering truth. The brilliance was a veil, masking a life shadowed by persistent dread. More than 100 pages were cataloged, documenting repeated incidents of blackmail attempts and obsessive correspondence. One letter, preserved verbatim, warned, "If you don't pay, your secrets will be revealed." The author was never identified, yet the implication, public humiliation, reputational ruin, lingered for years, forcing Houston into a constant state of vigilance that agents described as corrosive. Equally disturbing were the fan letters that crossed into fixation. Some ran dozens of pages, asserting ownership over her life and career, threatening retaliation if affection was not returned. Investigators noted the paradox: a woman adored by millions who hesitated to answer phones or open mail, fearful of who might be watching. The broader picture assembled by agents was unsettling. Houston was not only navigating temptation and pressure, but also a perceived risk of intrusion. Reports referenced individuals attempting to access her residences and restricted backstage areas. Over time, these incidents accumulated into psychological strain, eroding the confidence associated with the voice. Family members later recalled hypervigilance, locks checked repeatedly, sleep interrupted by imagined threats. A confidant summarized it starkly. Whitney believed something ominous followed her. Maintaining a flawless public persona while privately anticipating danger turned her life into a dual existence: spectacle outside, fear within. Years later, the file was closed. But after the 2015 incident involving Bobbi Kristina Brown, attention returned to those documents. The questions shifted. Were the threats merely psychological or part of a wider pressure system that never relented? No causal link was asserted by investigators. The FBI acknowledged only the existence of multiple intimidation efforts. Public interpretation, however, diverged. Some framed the mother-daughter parallel as coincidence amplified by myth. Others argued that sustained fear and trauma accelerated Houston's decline, creating conditions that later engulfed her daughter. The entertainment industry's role, its exposure, incentives, and indifference came under renewed scrutiny. Within the files were also cryptic notes, letters invoking destiny and inevitability. Individually incoherent, collectively unsettling. Placed against subsequent events, they fueled the language of a Houston curse, a term born less of evidence than of collective disbelief. Rumors persisted of feeling watched, unexplained disturbances, an unshakable sense of vulnerability. None were conclusively verified. Yet they reinforced a narrative of a woman who rarely found peace. The case file may be closed, but the questions endure. When the names Whitney Houston and Bobbi Kristina Brown surface, the memory is not only of talent and loss, but of shadows preserved in confidential pages, unidentified senders, unanswered threats, and the echoing stillness of bathtubs where two lives ended. For many, the phrase death curse became a shorthand, not for proof, but for a tragedy too stark to accept without explanation. Two bathtubs, two women, one a legend, the other her only heir. Federal summaries lay out the parallel with stark economy. Scenes separated by 3 years, yet almost identical in composition. When news broke about Bobbi Kristina Brown, it triggered what many investigators privately described as an echo from 2012, the year Whitney Houston died. Headlines across major outlets reached for the same adjectives, eerie, uncanny, as the public struggled to accept coincidence. From that moment, a phrase began circulating with momentum of its own. Death curse, a shorthand linking mother and daughter. From an evidentiary standpoint, Two generations collapsing in bathtubs, both cases intersecting with substances and unstable relationships, created a narrative gravity that invited mystical interpretation. The bathtub, ordinarily a place of rest, became the final setting in both timelines, transforming into a symbol of familial catastrophe. Media outlets labeled it the bathtub curse, while the public adopted a simpler name, the Houston curse. Yet analysts reviewing the same materials reached a different conclusion. Strip away the supernatural language, and what remains is a deeply wounded family system. Houston, despite her stature, was caught in an intense vortex of professional pressure, a turbulent marriage with Bobby Brown, and the relentless demand to appear flawless. Those fractures extended to Bobby Christina, who grew up amid cameras, scandal, and scrutiny. After her mother's death, records indicate she entered a profound void, clinging to a complicated bond with Nick Gordon without a stable refuge. Psychological assessments cited by investigators suggest Bobby lost more than a parent. She lost the framework that oriented her identity. While Whitney lived, however imperfectly, Bobby had an anchor. Once that anchor vanished, she faced public expectation alone. In that fragile state, dependency became a foreseeable outcome. In this reading, Death Curse functions less as an explanation than as metaphor, a name given to a cycle born of intergenerational trauma. Still, belief in a curse persisted. The similarities felt too precise for many to dismiss. Online forums filled with claims of an invisible hand, and some cited threatening correspondence preserved in Federal Bureau of Investigation files. Letters warning Whitney she could not escape her destiny, as ominous foreshadowing. Another lens emerged within Black America. Houston represented transcendence, proof that talent could break barriers. Her end revived a painful pattern seen in artists like Billie Holiday, Marvin Gaye, and Michael Jackson, fame accompanied by addiction, isolation, and controversy. When Bobby followed her mother, many saw a dark legacy, an inheritance passed unknowingly between generations. That may explain why this dual tragedy lingers so powerfully. It is not only the loss of a legend and a young woman, but the reminder that fame extracts a cost. For Whitney and Bobby, the light was blinding. Whether labeled Death Curse or understood as Dark Legacy, the story persists in collective memory, resurfacing whenever I Will Always Love You plays or when Bobby's final images circulate. Perhaps the truth lies between myth and analysis. Either way, this remains one of music history's darkest chapters, a file the world has never fully closed. In the years following the deaths of Whitney Houston and Bobby Christina Brown, many assumed time would dull the unease surrounding their stories. Yet federal records tell a different reality. Each time the Federal Bureau of Investigation file resurfaces, whenever an old letter is cited or a new rumor finds oxygen, the public reaction is immediate and visceral. Questions long buried return unanswered, and it is precisely these unresolved gaps that have cemented the case as one of the most contentious tragedies in modern entertainment history. When the FBI revisited archived materials, several chilling elements regained attention. Among them were the threatening letters Whitney had received years earlier. "If you don't pay, your secrets will be revealed." The language was blunt, coercive, and deeply personal. Investigators never established a direct causal link, but analysts note that sustained intimidation of this nature can exert cumulative psychological pressure. Whether these letters were merely words on paper or part of a broader invisible force remains officially unconfirmed, yet their shadow persists. Then there is the coincidence that refuses to fade. Two women from the same family, both discovered in bathtubs, both with toxic substances present, both entangled in unstable relationships. Some social scientists describe this as a textbook case of intergenerational trauma, a pattern rather than a mystery. But public perception resists clinical explanation. The image of Bobby Christina immediately resurrected Whitney's final moments, creating a narrative so visually and emotionally aligned that many concluded an unseen hand was guiding events. Coincidence or prophecy fulfilled? This divide sustains the Houston narrative. One camp, the rationalists, frames it as the cost of fame, isolation, image pressure, fractured relationships, and reliance on sedatives or stimulants. Crushed by fame, as American headlines once summarized. The opposing camp remains convinced of a family curse, arguing the repetition is too exact, too cruel to dismiss as chance. Whichever interpretation one accepts, the shared residue is grief. Whitney and Bobby Christina are remembered not only for talent and promise, but for lives that exposed the fragility beneath celebrity. Audiences still rise for "I Will Always Love You" and recall Bobby's tentative steps toward music. Yet what lingers is the sense that the spotlight demanded more than it ever returned. A critic once observed after Bobby's death, "Their voices may be gone, but their echoes will forever haunt the stage." That sentiment endures. Whitney's voice is silent, Bobby's potential unrealized, yet their resonance permeates memory and music alike. The mythology deepens with fragments often overlooked. Whitney confided to a friend that she felt the walls are closing in. Bobby once said publicly she wanted to carry her mother's legacy while acknowledging the weight of that shadow. Statements once dismissed as emotional candor now read like omens when revisited through the lens of hindsight. And so the central question remains unresolved. A literal death curse or a dark legacy passed from mother to daughter? Perhaps no definitive answer exists. It is this absence of closure that has elevated the Houston story beyond biography into modern legend. Today, when Whitney's melodies play at weddings, films, and memorials, listeners remember more than a voice. They remember a fragile legend, a daughter lost too soon, and a chapter of music history whose echoes have never truly faded. Music at times resembles a river, capable of carrying millions with grace and force, yet powerful enough to pull under those who create it. Whitney Houston, forever remembered as the Voice, and Bobby Christina Brown, a daughter who never had the chance to fully grow into herself, left behind melodies of rare beauty. In return, they carried wounds that never truly healed. When both lives ended in scenes so disturbingly similar, the public was confronted with an uncomfortable truth, long documented in investigative margins. Talent, fame, and tragedy are often inseparable. The Federal Bureau of Investigation may reopen files, re-examine threatening letters, and catalog anonymous intimidation. The media may continue to analyze habits, relationships, and the private shadows that followed both women. Yet even the most exhaustive review cannot fill the absence they left behind. The unanswered questions persist, suspended in silence, and it is precisely this unresolved space that has turned the Houston story into a somber ballad with no final verse. Debate continues over labels like death curse or dark legacy. But when Whitney's voice rises from a speaker, or when images of a smiling Bobby Christina resurface, those theories shrink in relevance. What remains is a shared sorrow, one that extends beyond a single family to everyone who ever believed in the promise of the spotlight. Perhaps this is the true inheritance they left behind, not a curse, not anonymous threats, nor even the unsettling symmetry of their deaths, but a reminder etched into cultural memory. Behind every note, every ovation, every blinding stage light, there is a human being, fragile, exposed, and more vulnerable than applause ever reveals. Whitney once sang, "Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all." In hindsight, that lyric reads less like a refrain and more like a testament. It may be the most enduring lesson Whitney and Bobby Christina left behind, a melody that does not fade, a warning that does not age, and a song that, for the world, never truly ends. The story of Whitney Houston and Bobby Christina Brown remains a tragedy that continues to unsettle the world. Two generations, two destinies, both ending under circumstances so disturbingly alike that they feel carved into public memory. Some describe it as a death curse, others as a dark legacy. But labels aside, the record reflects something more concrete. A family caught in a relentless current of fame, pressure, and unresolved darkness. Whitney once occupied the summit of global stardom, where the lights illuminated her brilliance while concealing private tears. Bobby Christina, inheriting both her mother's promise and her scars, proved unable to step outside that orbit. As the Federal Bureau of Investigation revisits archived materials and the public reconsiders long-known details, debates persist. Yet the enduring conclusion is stark. Behind the spectacle of celebrity, human vulnerability is far greater than it appears. Perhaps what deserves remembrance is not merely the notion of a Houston curse, but what endures beyond it, a voice that moved millions, a family history that forces reflection, and a lesson Whitney herself once voiced. That learning to love oneself is, indeed, the greatest love of all. If this account resonates, consider sharing your thoughts and continuing the conversation. Revisiting pain is not only an act of mourning, but also an opportunity to recognize fragility, cultivate empathy, and protect those still living within the glare of the spotlight.